Listen, Mr. Vice President. I remain uncertain as to what variety of McCarthy-style inquisition you imagine you are conducting within these walls, but allow me to state with absolute clarity that I refuse to be intimidated by your presence. I embody the future of this nation, while you merely symbolize its past. I fight relentlessly for the working class, for climate justice, and for universal health care, whereas you are simply a venture capitalist who authored a book romanticizing poverty while accumulating wealth through the labor of others. Therefore, if this hearing is intended to scrutinize my support for the Green New Deal or my efforts to expose corporate corruption, you may save your breath, for I will not retreat before fascists. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez declared. Ocasio-Cortez stood within the House Ethics Committee hearing room, her phone already in hand as she mentally composed tweets, not even having taken her seat yet, determined to make this performance count, and eager for the video clips to go viral. At 29 years old, dressed in a designer blazer with flawless makeup, she presented the perfect image of millennial resistance on that day, February 15th, 2025, just weeks into the new legislative session. Although the room was not as crowded as she had anticipated, given that this was a closed session with no press permitted, she decided that was acceptable. She would simply tweet through the event, craft her own narrative, and demonstrate to her 72 million TikTok followers exactly what Republican intimidation looked like. Vice President JD Vance sat at the witness table, appearing almost bored, displaying neither anger nor defensiveness, but rather a calm demeanor, flanked by FEC Chairman Luis Rodriguez and FBI Director Christopher Wray, both of whom had thick binders positioned before them. That visual cue should have been her primary warning that this situation was grave. But AOC was riding a wave of confidence, having become the most famous member of Congress in America, with more Instagram followers than most senators, and a constant media presence as the brightest star of the squad. She had raised $23 million during her last campaign and had solidified her status as a progressive icon, leading her to believe she was untouchable. And another thing, she continued, pacing slightly with her phone still firmly in her grasp, this entire committee is illegitimate. It is controlled by Republicans, who utilize it to target young women of color who dare to challenge power. My constituents see through this charade, America sees through it, and you are threatened by me, because I am effective and because I actually fight for you. Done? Vance interrupted, his voice flat and calm, looking not the least bit threatened, but rather like a prosecutor preparing to present a case. Ocasio-Cortez laughed, employing that practiced laugh she often used on camera, saying, "Oh, I am just getting started because this is exactly what." "Sit down," Vance commanded, not loudly, but with absolute authority, "because I am not here to debate Medicare for all, nor am I here to argue regarding the Green New Deal. I am here to present evidence that you have committed the largest campaign finance fraud in congressional history." The laughter instantly vanished from AOC's face. "You claim you raised $20 million from grassroots donors," Vance continued, his voice steady and factual. "Small dollar contributions from working people who believe in your message, as that is your brand. The Democratic Socialist bartender who takes on billionaires with people power. Great story, yet completely false," he said, as he opened his folder. "For you raised $3 million from Chinese solar companies, laundered through shell packs, designed to obfuscate the source. Your boyfriend's consulting firm, which performed exactly zero actual work, was paid $1.9 million of donor money, and you purchased a $4 million townhouse in Manhattan while tweeting about struggling to afford rent, and every single policy position you have adopted has perfectly aligned with Chinese Communist Party interests. AOC's confidence wavered as she retorted, "That is a lie. My campaign finance is completely transparent." FEC Chairman Rodriguez, Vance said, ignoring her protest, "Show her the Chinese money." Rodriguez pulled up financial records on the screen at the front of the room and began, "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, your campaign and associated PACs received $8.3 million over 4 years from organizations we have traced directly back to Chinese solar manufacturers. Let me demonstrate the flow," he said, as a complex flow chart appeared with lines connecting Chinese companies to U.S. organizations and ultimately to AOC's campaigns. LONGi Solar, the largest solar panel manufacturer in China, contributes $2.4 million to an organization called the U.S. Climate Foundation, registered in Delaware, he explained, noting that the foundation makes grants to the Sunrise Movement, which is the primary organization supporting her campaigns. The Sunrise Movement makes independent expenditures for you, totaling $1.8 million. And we see the same pattern with BYD, Trina Solar, and Jinko Solar, all Chinese solar companies, all funding organizations that support you. He clicked through transaction records, stating, "Total Chinese money that ended up supporting your campaigns is $3 million. You have been funded by the Chinese Communist Party to push policies that benefit Chinese industry while destroying American energy independence." AOC's face had gone pale, and she looked at her phone as if she wished to tweet this away, but did not know how. "Those are independent expenditures I do not control," she began. But Vance interrupted, "You coordinate with Sunrise constantly. We have emails and text messages showing you meet with their leadership weekly and plan strategy together. So do not pretend these are independent organizations that just happen to support you." FBI Director Wray spoke up for the first time, stating, "We also have evidence regarding Riley Roberts, your boyfriend. His company, Digital Outreach Strategies, has received $1.9 million from PACs you control over 3 years. We have interviewed people at those PACs and asked them what work Riley's company delivered, and nobody can tell us because he did not do any work. It is a slush fund, where you paid your boyfriend $2 million of donor money for fake consulting services." AOC tried to recover, insisting, "Riley's company provides legitimate digital strategy," to which Wray flatly replied, "Then show us the deliverables. Show us the websites he built, the email campaigns he designed, the social media strategies he created. We have asked the PACs, and they have nothing because he did nothing. You simply paid him $2 million. Vance then pulled out property records, saying, "Let us discuss your lifestyle. You campaign as a working-class bartender. You tweet about struggling to afford an apartment in D.C., and you talk about being a regular person, representing regular people, yet you own a $4 million townhouse in Washington Heights. You bought it with cash last year, while your congressional salary is $174,000, and you have only been in office 6 years," he said, showing photos of the property, a beautiful brownstone consisting of 3 stories in an upscale neighborhood. "You drive a $90,000 Tesla that was donated to you by a climate PAC, which is an illegal campaign contribution that you never reported, and you wear designer clothes worth thousands of dollars to events and pretend they are borrowed for exposure. Your entire working-class struggling bartender image is performance art," Vance declared. AOC looked genuinely shaken now, her confidence completely gone, as she stammered, "You are twisting." "I am presenting evidence," Vance said calmly. "Evidence that you are a fraud, that you have been funded by Communist China to push their agenda, that you have enriched yourself and your boyfriend with donor money, that you have lied about who you are to manipulate supporters, and that you have violated multiple campaign finance laws doing it." He leaned forward slightly and asked, "So, do you want to call me a fascist again? Or do you want to see exactly how much prison time you are looking at for wire fraud, campaign finance violations, and false statements?" AOC stood frozen, her phone dangling uselessly in her hand, as this was not supposed to happen. This was not the script where she was supposed to be the hero standing up to power, not the subject of a fraud investigation. Let us start with the Chinese connection and work our way through all of it. AOC finally sat down, and for the first time since entering politics, she had no idea what to say. To understand how we arrived at this point, how the Democratic Socialist darling ended up facing federal fraud charges, one must go back 8 hours earlier when AOC woke up, thinking this was just another performance opportunity. 8 hours earlier, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez woke up in her townhouse in Washington Heights, immediately reached for her phone, and started scrolling through her social media, noting 12 million views on her latest TikTok about corporate greed, and seeing she was trending on Twitter for her comments about taxing billionaires. It was another day and another viral moment as her phone buzzed with a reminder for the House Ethics Committee hearing at 5 p.m. She had been notified 3 days ago of an urgent matter regarding campaign finance and related issues, but the summons had been vague, which usually meant Republicans were fishing for something to attack her with. She was not worried, as she had been investigated before. Conservative outlets obsessed over her constantly, investigating her college expenses, her apartment, and her boyfriend's background, yet every single time they found nothing, because she was careful and followed the rules well, mostly. And even when she bent them, she had lawyers who made sure she stayed on the legal side of things. Her communications director, a young progressive activist named Jaime Chen, arrived at 9 for their morning strategy session, and they sat in AOC's home office, which featured exposed brick, progressive posters, and pictures of her with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren going over the day's schedule. "The Ethics Committee thing?" Jaime said, reviewing notes on her tablet. "Do we know what it is actually about?" AOC shrugged, sipping her oat milk latte, and replied, "Probably the usual. They are mad. I raised $23 million last cycle. Mad that working people actually support me. Republicans cannot handle that someone under 30 is more popular than their entire gerontocracy," she added. Jaime noted, "The summons mentioned JD Vance specifically requested to testify, which is unusual as vice presidents do not normally get involved in ethics committee stuff." AOC laughed. "Because he is threatened by me. I am everything he hates. Young, diverse, and actually from the working class, unlike his fake hillbilly shtick, where he wrote a book about poverty while becoming a millionaire venture capitalist. I actually lived it, so of course he wants to take me down," she said, feeling supremely confident. She had become a phenomenon, rising from bartender to congresswoman to national icon in less than 6 years. With her face on magazine covers, her tweets analyzed by political scientists, and her fashion choices discussed by style blogs, she was famous in a way that transcended politics. She was a brand, a movement, the future of progressive politics, and every attack on her had backfired. When Trump told her to go back to her country, her fundraising tripled. When Fox News obsessed over her, she became more famous. When they investigated her apartment lease, she turned it into a lesson about housing inequality, proving she was Teflon and nothing stuck. "Here is what we do," AOC said, already planning her content strategy. "I go into the hearing. I live tweet. The whole thing. Call out their intimidation tactics. Make them look petty and obsessed. And by tonight, I will have another viral moment, and we will raise $500,000 off the clips." Jaime nodded, already drafting tweets, and asked, "Do you want me to alert friendly media to have them waiting outside?" "It is a closed session," AOC said. "But yeah, have people ready. I will do a statement afterward. Something about not being intimidated by fascist Republicans. It will be perfect." She spent the rest of the morning on regular congressional work, constituent meetings, staff briefings, and a virtual town hall. But in the back of her mind, she was excited about the hearing as another chance to perform and another opportunity to show her supporters she was fearless. What AOC did not know and could not have imagined was that Vice President Vance had spent 6 months building a case, not a political attack, but an actual fraud case, with FEC violations, FBI evidence, and Treasury Department money tracing evidence that would destroy her career and send her to prison. At 7 that morning, hours before AOC woke up, JD Vance sat in his West Wing office with a team that included FEC Chairman Luis Rodriguez, FBI Director Christopher Wray, Treasury Department Financial Crimes Unit Head Margaret Chen, and White House Counsel Todd Blanche. The conference table was covered with financial records, transaction reports, corporate filings, emails, and text messages representing 6 months of investigation distilled into evidence that would end a political career. Vance looked at the assembled team. At 42, he was the youngest vice president in modern history, a former Marine, former venture capitalist, former senator from Ohio, and before all that, a lawyer who understood how to build cases and present evidence. He had spent months personally reviewing every detail of this investigation. "Walk me through it one more time," he said. "I want to make sure we have got everything locked down before this afternoon." FEC Chairman Rodriguez opened his binder. He was a career federal elections lawyer who had worked at the FEC for 20 years under both parties, and this was the largest fraud case he had ever built. Representative Ocasio-Cortez's public narrative is that she is funded by grassroots small-dollar donors, Rodriguez began, working people giving $20 or $50 because they believe in democratic socialism, as that is her brand. People power versus billionaire money. But we traced her actual funding, and it tells a very different story, he said, pulling up financial flowcharts covering the 4 years from 2021 through 2024. AOC's campaigns and associated PACs received approximately $8.3 million that originated from Chinese solar manufacturers, Rodriguez explained, and the money is laundered through multiple layers to hide the source. But we have documented the entire chain. He showed the first example. LONGi Solar, the largest solar panel manufacturer in China, and a state-owned enterprise, contributes to something called the U.S. Climate Foundation, which is registered in Delaware as a 501(3). The Climate Foundation then makes grants to Sunrise Movement, Justice Democrats, and several other progressive organizations that support AOC, totaling $2.4 million that started with LONGi and ended up supporting her. BYD Company, a Chinese electric vehicle and battery manufacturer that is also state-owned, funds the Green Future Fund, another Delaware-registered organization. He continued, noting that Green Future makes independent expenditures supporting AOC with an amount traced at $1.8 million. Trina Solar, Jinko Solar, and Canadian Solar, all Chinese companies despite one having Canada in the name, fund various climate PACs that all support AOC. With a combined total of $4.1 million, Rodriguez showed the complete flowchart of multiple Chinese companies feeding money through multiple U.S. organizations, all supporting one person, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, stating, "Total we can document is $8.3 million over 4 years, could be more that we haven't traced yet. But $8 million is what we can prove. Vance studied the charts and asked, "Can we prove she knew the money was Chinese?" "She had to know," Rodriguez said. "She coordinates constantly with these organizations. We have emails between her staff and Sunrise Movement, planning joint events, text messages with Justice Democrats, strategizing on messaging, so these are not truly independent organizations. They are her campaign infrastructure. And here is the key point," Rodriguez continued. "Every major policy position she has taken benefits Chinese industry at the expense of American workers. She wants to ban fracking, which helps China by making America dependent on foreign energy. She wants massive solar subsidies when 90% of solar panels are made in China. She wants to eliminate fossil fuels, which would destroy American energy independence and make us reliant on Chinese manufacturing. Her entire climate agenda serves Chinese Communist Party interests," he concluded. Treasury's Margaret Chen added the next layer, stating, "We have also identified serious campaign finance violations separate from the Chinese money." Her boyfriend, Riley Roberts, operates a company called Digital Outreach Strategies. Over 3 years, that company received $1.9 million from PACs that AOC controls or has significant influence over, she said, showing the payment records. Courage to Change, that is AOC's leadership PAC, paid Riley's company $680,000. Justice Democrats paid $490,000. Sunrise Movement paid $370,000. Green New Deal Network paid $360,000, totaling $1.9 million. "We investigated what work Riley's company actually performed," Chen continued, "and we interviewed staff at all these organizations, asked them to describe deliverables, show us websites, email campaigns, social media strategies, anything, but nobody could produce anything because he did not do any work. This is a classic corruption scheme. Hiring your partner's company, paying them donor money for fake services, and enriching yourselves." FBI Director Wray presented the lifestyle evidence, noting AOC's congressional salary is $174,000 per year, and she has been in office 6 years, making her total congressional salary approximately $1 million. Even if she saved every penny, she could not afford her lifestyle. He showed property records indicating that last year she purchased a townhouse in Washington Heights for $4 million in a cash purchase with no mortgage, a beautiful 3-story brownstone in one of Manhattan's most expensive neighborhoods. How does a bartender turned congresswoman making $174 have $4 million in cash? Wray asked, as photos of the property appeared. She also drives a Tesla Model S Plaid, retail price $90,000, which we traced as donated to her by a climate PAC called Green Transportation Future, he said, noting that this is an illegal in-kind campaign contribution that was never reported, and the car is titled in her name personally, not her campaign. "We have identified over $200,000 in designer outfits over 3 years. Versace, Prabal, Gurung, Brothers, all supposedly borrowed or loaned for exposure, but House rules require reporting anything of value over $390, and she has reported none of it. Her public persona is a struggling bartender," Wray said. "She tweets about how hard it is to afford DC rent. She talks about being a regular person, but she lives in a $4 million townhouse, drives a $90,000 car, and wears designer clothes worth more than her constituents make in a year. It is all fake." White House counsel Blanche outlined the legal framework, stating, "We have multiple potential charges: campaign finance violations for the Chinese money and unreported contributions, wire fraud for the boyfriend scheme, using donor money for fake services, and false statements for her financial disclosures that do not match her actual assets. We are looking at 15 to 20 years prison time if convicted on everything, he concluded. Vance absorbed it all: the Chinese money, the boyfriend fraud, the fake working-class image, the policy positions serving China. Realizing it was overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud. How do we present this? He asked. Rodriguez had the strategy. Start with the Chinese money to show the flowcharts and make it clear she has been funded by Communist China, which gets everyone's attention and frames the rest. Then the boyfriend scheme to show it is not just foreign corruption, it is personal corruption where she is enriching herself and her partner. Then, the lifestyle fraud to show she is lying about who she is and that the working-class image is fake. Then tie it together. Show her policies serve China because China paid for her. Show she is compromised. And finally lay out the criminal charges to make it clear this is not political. These are actual crimes. Vance looked at the evidence one more time. He had known AOC was a fraud, and everyone who paid attention knew her democratic socialism was more brand than substance. But this was beyond what he had expected. She was not just a performative progressive. She was an actual criminal, taking foreign money and using campaigns to enrich herself. She is going to come in thinking she can perform her way through this, Vance said, thinking she can make viral content and spin it. Let her. Let her be arrogant. Let her call me a fascist. Then hit her with evidence she cannot tweet away. At 4:30 that afternoon, AOC arrived at the Capitol, having changed into her hearing outfit, a designer blazer that cost $3,000, which she would claim was borrowed, statement earrings, and perfect hair and makeup ready for her close-up and for clips that would go viral. She walked into the Ethics Committee hearing room, expecting cameras, but there were none. It was a closed session with just committee members, Vance at the witness table, and the officials with him. That should have worried her, but she was too confident and too sure of her own invincibility. So she launched into her prepared speech without even sitting down, calling Vance a fascist and a venture capitalist hypocrite, and accusing him of running a witch hunt, just as she had rehearsed. Vance let her finish and did not interrupt, just watching with that calm prosecutor look. When she was done, he asked simply, "You done?" She laughed and started again until he said, "Sit down." And something in his voice made her pause. "Because I am not here to debate policy, I am here to present evidence that you have committed the largest campaign finance fraud in congressional history," he said. AOC's confident smile disappeared, and her world started to collapse. FEC Chairman Rodriguez stood up, walked to the screen at the front of the room, clicked his remote, and a complex flowchart appeared, showing money movement through multiple organizations. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez," he began, his voice neutral and professional. "For 6 months, we have been investigating the source of funding for your campaigns and associated organizations, and what we found is systematic money laundering from Chinese state-owned enterprises designed to hide foreign contributions to your political activities." He used a laser pointer to trace the first flow. "Let us start with LONGi Solar. This is the largest solar panel manufacturer in the world, headquartered in Xi'an, China, and 62% owned by the Chinese government. In 2021, LONGi contributed $5 million to an organization called the U.S. Climate Foundation, which is registered in Delaware, has no employees, no office, and exists only on paper. Its sole activity is making grants to progressive climate organizations, and in 2021 and 2022, it granted $2.4 million to Sunrise Movement, he said, showing transaction records. Sunrise Movement then made independent expenditures, supporting your campaigns, ads in your district, canvassing operations, digital advertising, totaling $1.8 million directly supporting you. The money came from Chinese state-owned solar manufacturers, was laundered through the Climate Foundation, went to Sunrise, and supported your campaigns, he explained. AOC tried to interrupt, saying, "Independent expenditures aren't coordination. I don't control what Sunrise." But Rodriguez stated flatly, "We have emails," clicking to show them. Between your Chief of Staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, and Sunrise Executive Director Varshini Prakash, coordinating strategy, planning events together, and discussing which districts to target, he said. These are not independent expenditures. This is coordination, which makes them illegal contributions if they exceed limits. And Chinese money absolutely exceeds limits since foreign contributions are banned entirely. He moved to the next flow. BYD Company, Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer, also state-owned, contributed $3 million to Green Future Fund in 2022. Green Future is another Delaware shell organization which granted $1.8 million to Justice Democrats, the organization that recruited you to run in 2018, and Justice Democrats made independent expenditures for your campaign. Again, the money originated with Chinese state-owned companies, Rodriguez said, as he went through 4 more examples. Trina Solar, Jinko Solar, Canadian Solar, which despite the name is actually based in China, and Longi Green Energy, all Chinese solar companies, all contributing to U.S. organizations that funneled money to groups supporting AOC. Total, we have documented $3 million that originated with Chinese companies and ended up supporting your political career. Could be more. But this is just what we have definitively traced, he said. He pulled up a summary chart showing all the flows together, and it was undeniable. Multiple Chinese companies feeding money through multiple U.S. shells to multiple organizations, all supporting one person. This violates the Federal Election Campaign Act prohibition on foreign contributions, Rodriguez said. Chinese companies cannot contribute to U.S. political campaigns, even indirectly, by coordinating with these organizations, and while they were funded by Chinese money, you knowingly accepted foreign contributions, and that is a felony. AOC's voice was shaky now as she said, "I didn't know where Sunrise or Justice Democrats get their funding. That's not my responsibility." "You are on Sunrise Movement's board," Rodriguez said, showing corporate filings listing her as an advisory board member since 2019. "You attend their strategy meetings? You fundraise for them. So do not pretend you do not know how they are funded," he said, clicking to email exchanges. Here is an email from Sunrise leadership in 2022 discussing a major contribution from our climate technology partners that is code for the solar companies, and they CC your chief of staff, and your staff responds, thanking them for the support and suggesting ways to use the money. You knew, your staff knew, and you accepted it anyway. FBI Director Wray took over presenting evidence of personal corruption. Let us talk about Riley Roberts, your long-term boyfriend. He operates a company called Digital Outreach Strategies, registered in New York in 2020. He said, noting that according to public filings, it provides digital marketing and consulting services to political organizations. He showed payment records, indicating that over 3 years, Riley's company received $9 million from PACs that she controlled or heavily influenced. Let us break that down. Courage to Change, your leadership PAC, paid Digital Outreach $680,000 between 2021 and 2024. Justice Democrats paid $490,000. Sunrise Movement paid $370,000. Green New Deal Network paid $360,000, for a total of $1,900,000, he said, looking at AOC. That is a lot of money for digital consulting, So we investigated what work his company actually performed, he continued. We interviewed the executive directors of all 4 organizations, asked them to describe specific deliverables, show us websites built, email campaigns designed, social media strategies created. Know what we found? He asked, clicking to interview transcripts. Exact quote from Varshini Prakash of Sunrise Movement. Riley provided general strategic advice. I can't point to specific projects. It was more of an ongoing consulting relationship. We pressed her to show us any documents, any emails with strategic recommendations, and she could not, he said. Quote from Alexandria Rojas of Justice Democrats. Digital outreach helped with our online presence. I don't have specific documentation of deliverables. The work was collaborative and informal. Again, we asked for documentation and got nothing, Ray said, noting the same pattern at Courage to Change and Green New Deal Network. Nobody could describe actual work product. Nobody could show deliverables because Riley Roberts did not do any work. These payments were not for services rendered. They were payments to your boyfriend using donor money, and that is fraud. Ray pulled up financial records and said, we also subpoenaed Riley's business accounts. Digital outreach strategies has minimal expenses. No employees, no office rent, no software subscriptions, no subcontractors, and his profit margin is 98%. He is pocketing almost all the money because he is not actually running a business. This is a classic political corruption scheme where politicians cannot take campaign money for personal use, but they can hire their spouse or partner's company, pay inflated rates, and the partner's company becomes household income. You both benefit while maintaining plausible deniability? It is illegal. And you did it. AOC looked genuinely scared now as she protested. Riley's company provides legitimate services. Just because the work isn't documented doesn't mean, but Ray interrupted. Then, show us the work. Right now, pull out your phone. Show us websites he built, email campaigns he created, strategy documents he wrote. Anything, he challenged. There was silence, as AOC had nothing to show. That is because there is no work, Ray said. There is just payments to your boyfriend. 1. $9 million of donor money that ended up in your household. Treasury's Margaret Chen presented the lifestyle evidence. Let us examine your public image versus your actual life, she began. You campaign as a working-class bartender. You constantly reference your working-class background. You tweet about struggling to afford DC rent. And you position yourself as a regular person representing regular people against the elite, she said as she pulled up AOC's tweets. Here is you in 2023, still paying off student loans and barely affording DC rent. This is why we need to fight for working families. That tweet got 800,000 likes, she noted. Here is you in 2024. Went to the grocery store today. Prices are insane. I feel what working people are going through. 600,000 likes, she continued. You have built your entire brand on being relatable, on struggling like your constituents struggle, on understanding working-class life, because you live it, Chen said, then clicked to property records. This is the deed for 437 West 151st Street, Manhattan, Washington Heights neighborhood. A 3-story townhouse with 4 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, and roof deck with city views, purchased October 2024 for $4 million cash, no mortgage. She showed photos of the property, a beautiful brownstone on a tree-lined street that was clearly upscale. The buyer listed on the deed is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Chen stated. AOC started to speak, but Chen continued. Your congressional salary is $174,000 per year, and you have been in office 6 years making your total salary approximately $1,040,000. Even if you saved 100% of your salary, paid zero taxes, and had zero living expenses, you would have $1 million. Yet you bought a house for $4 million. Where did the other $3 million come from? She asked. The house was a gift from family, AOC tried weakly. Then, that is a taxable gift requiring IRS reporting. Chen said, Did you report a $3 million gift? No, because it was not a gift. You bought it with money we are still tracing. Money that likely came from these fraudulent PAC payments. She showed the next item. Tesla Model S. Plaid. Retail price, $91,000. Registered to you personally in March 2024. We traced the purchase paid for by Green Transportation Future, a climate PAC. That is an illegal in-kind campaign contribution that should have been titled to your campaign and reported as a contribution. But instead, it is your personal car, and you never reported it. More evidence. Designer wardrobe. We have documented you wearing over $200,000 in designer clothes to various events over 3 years, she said. Prabal Gurung gown to Met Gala cost $12,000. Brothers custom pieces cost $8,000. Aliette suit to State of the Union cost $4,000, all supposedly borrowed for exposure, but House ethics rules require reporting anything of value over $390. And you have reported zero. Chen showed side-by-side images. On the left, AOC's tweets about struggling to afford rent, and on the right, photos of her $4 million townhouse, $90,000 Tesla. Your working-class struggling bartender image is completely fake. You live like a millionaire while pretending to be one of the people, and that is fraud. Because you are deceiving your supporters to maintain a brand that helps you raise money and win elections. Vice President Vance took over for this section, his voice sharp and prosecutorial. Let us tie this together. Why would Chinese companies spend $8 million supporting you, and what do they get for their investment? He asked. The answer is simple. Your policies serve Chinese interests perfectly. He pulled up a policy analysis and said, Your signature issue is the Green New Deal. You want to eliminate fossil fuels, ban fracking, and force America to 100% renewable energy by 2030. Sounds progressive, but actually serves China perfectly, he said, showing the data. Currently, 90% of solar panels are manufactured in China, 80% of wind turbine components come from China, and 75% of battery production is in China. If America goes all renewable, we become completely dependent on Chinese manufacturing, which is exactly what China wants. You want to ban fracking, which is the technology that made America energy independent for the first time in decades, and banning it would force us to import more energy from countries that buy from China. You are advocating for policies that would destroy American energy independence and make us reliant on China, he said, showing her voting record. You voted against the USMCA trade deal that had protections for American workers against Chinese dumping. You voted against every bill, strengthening oversight of Chinese companies, and you opposed tariffs on Chinese solar panels. Every single position you take on trade and energy benefits China, Vance asserted. You also constantly attack American oil and gas workers, call them planet killers, and say their jobs need to be eliminated. But on Chinese coal plants and Chinese pollution, you are silent. China produces more emissions than the US and Europe combined, but you never criticize them. Why? Because they are paying you. Vance showed the perfect correlation. Chinese companies fund you. You push policies that benefit Chinese companies. You attack American industries that compete with China. And you never criticize China's environmental record. This is not ideology. "This is being bought," he said, looking directly at her. "You are not a democratic socialist. You are a Chinese asset. Whether you realize it or not, you have been compromised, and you are advocating for policies that serve a foreign adversary because that adversary is funding your career." White House counsel Blanche laid out the legal consequences. "Based on the evidence presented, the Department of Justice will be filing charges," he stated. "Let me walk you through what you are facing," he said, ticking off the counts on his fingers. Count 1. Accepting illegal foreign contributions in violation of 52 U.S.C. 30121. Chinese money funneled through PACs, penalty up to 5 years per violation. We have identified 17 separate violations, so that is 85 years maximum, though you would serve them concurrent. Counts 2 through 5. Wire fraud. Under 18 U.S.C. 1,343. Using donor money to pay your boyfriend for fake services. Each payment is a separate count. Penalty up to 20 years per count. Counts 6 through 12. False statements on financial disclosure. Forms under 18. U.S.C. 1001. You failed to report the house value, the Tesla, and the designer clothes. Each omission is a separate violation. Penalty up to 5 years per count. Count 13. Tax evasion under 26. U.S.C. 7,201. If the house was a gift, it is taxable, and you didn't report it. If it was purchased with unreported income, that is also tax evasion, penalty up to 5 years, and substantial fines. He showed sentencing guidelines and said, realistically, if convicted on everything, you are looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. You would likely serve 12 to 15 with good behavior, and you would also face millions in fines and restitution. We will file charges next week. Your lawyers can try to negotiate a plea, but the evidence is strong, he warned. If you go to trial, you will lose. The Chinese money is documented. The boyfriend fraud is documented. The lifestyle fraud is documented. We have you on all of it. AOC sat completely still. All the arrogance from the beginning of the hearing, gone. She looked small and scared, like the 28-year-old bartender she had been before this all started, not the progressive icon she had become. "I didn't know the money was Chinese," she said quietly. "I thought it was legitimate climate donations." "You are on Sunrise's board," Vance said. "Your staff coordinated with them. You knew or should have known, and ignorance is not a defense for campaign finance violations. Riley's company did real work," she insisted. "Then you will be able to show that at trial," Ray said. "We will see how a jury feels about $1.9 million for work nobody can describe." AOC looked at her phone like she wanted to tweet her way out of this, but there was no tweet that could fix this. No viral video that could make this go away. The evidence was too strong. For the first time in her political career, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had no idea what to do. The hearing ended at 8 p.m. after 3 hours of devastating evidence, and AOC left the Capitol in a daze, ignoring the few reporters who had heard something big had happened. She could not face cameras and could not spin this. Not yet. She spent that night with lawyers, not her usual progressive activist attorneys, but criminal defense lawyers who handled federal fraud cases. They reviewed what she told them about the evidence, and every single one gave her the same assessment. This is bad. Very bad. The Chinese money is the killer, one lawyer said. Foreign contributions are a strict liability crime. It doesn't matter if you knew the source. If foreign money supported your campaign through any route, and you coordinated with those groups, you are guilty. The boyfriend payments might be defensible if we can show real work, another added. But if there is truly no work product, That is textbook fraud. The lifestyle stuff shows consciousness of guilt. A third said, you were lying about your financial situation to maintain a fake image. And that goes to intent, making everything else look worse. They tried to figure out a strategy. Maybe fight the Chinese money by arguing she didn't coordinate. But the emails showed coordination. Maybe claim Riley did legitimate work, but there was no work product to show. Maybe say the lifestyle claims were just political messaging, but she had filed false financial disclosures. Every angle led to a dead end. By morning, word was leaking that the Ethics Committee investigated AOC yesterday and VP Vance testified, meaning something big had occurred. Media started calling, so AOC's office released a statement. Last night's hearing was a politically motivated attack by Republicans who are threatened by a young woman of color who fights for working people. It bought her 12 hours. Then Vance held a press conference standing in the White House briefing room with FEC Chairman Rodriguez, FBI Director Wray, and Attorney General Pam Bondi behind him. Vance laid out the case publicly, stating, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been under investigation for 6 months for campaign finance fraud. Yesterday, we presented evidence to the House Ethics Committee, and today we are announcing that the Department of Justice will be filing criminal charges. He outlined it systematically. The Chinese money laundered through climate pacts, the boyfriend fraud, the fake working-class image while living in luxury, the policies serving Chinese interests, all of it. He did not editorialize, did not call her a socialist or attack her politics, but just presented facts and evidence, which made it more devastating. Networks split screens, showing Vance on the left, presenting evidence, and on the right, that photo of AOC in her designer dress at the Met Gala, with "Tax the Rich" written on it. The contrast was brutal. Even progressive media could not fully defend her. Yes, Republicans had political motivations, but the evidence was real. The Chinese money was documented. The boyfriend payments were documented. The $4 million townhouse was real. Representative Ro Khanna, usually a squad ally, issued a statement saying, "These are serious allegations that must be fully investigated. No one is above the law." Senator Bernie Sanders, AOC's political mentor, was more supportive but cautious, saying, "We should let the legal process play out before rushing to judgment," but many Democrats were already distancing themselves because they could not afford to defend someone taking Chinese money, not in the current political environment. Within 48 hours, calls for her resignation came from moderate Democrats, suggesting she should step down until this was resolved. AOC refused, appearing on MSNBC to insist she was innocent, saying, "This is what they do to women of color who challenge power. They weaponize the justice system." But she looked scared on camera, not defiant, and viewers noticed. The House Ethics Committee voted unanimously to recommend expulsion proceedings, as even the Democrats on the committee could not defend her with the evidence they had seen. Articles of expulsion were drafted, and the House would vote in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the DOJ filed charges in United States vs. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the indictment laid it all out in 17 counts: campaign finance violations, wire fraud, and false statements, each one supported by exhibits of financial records, emails, and testimony. AOC's lawyers tried to get charges dismissed, but the judge denied the motion, ruling that these are serious allegations supported by substantial evidence. They will be decided at trial. Facing expulsion and criminal charges, AOC made a decision and resigned from Congress, releasing a statement calling it a fascist political persecution, but saying she did not want to distract from progressive priorities. It fooled no one. She resigned because she was going to be expelled, and because she needed to focus on her criminal defense. Her trial began in September 2025, lasting 6 weeks in federal court in D.C. The prosecution presented the evidence methodically: the Chinese money flows, the boyfriend fraud, the lifestyle evidence, testimony from PAC directors who couldn't describe Riley's work, and emails showing coordination. AOC's defense tried everything, claiming she didn't know about the Chinese money, but emails showed her staff discussing it, claiming Riley did real work but couldn't produce any, claiming her lifestyle was funded by legitimate book deals and speaking fees. But the math didn't add up. The jury deliberated for 2 days, and when they came back, the verdict was devastating. Guilty on 14 of 17 counts, including the Chinese money charges, most of the boyfriend fraud charges, and the false statements charges. Sentencing came in November 2025, and the judge was not sympathetic, stating, "Miss Ocasio-Cortez, you built your career on representing working people. You claimed to be one of them. You claimed to fight against corruption and foreign influence, but you were taking money from Chinese companies while pushing their agenda. You were enriching yourself and your boyfriend with donor money. You were lying about who you were to manipulate people who believed in you, and you have shown no remorse. Even now, you claim to be a victim. You are not a victim. You are a fraud who got caught," the judge said. "I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. You will also pay $3.2 million in restitution to the donors who were defrauded." AOC broke down crying. 12 years meant she would be 41 when she got out, and her political career was over before it really started. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez entered federal prison in December 2025 at FCI Danbury in Connecticut, a medium-security women's facility, about 70 miles north of New York City, the same prison that had housed Piper Kerman, whose memoir became "Orange is the New Black." AOC probably thought about that irony as the transport van pulled through the gates, taking her from Met Gala red carpets to prison intake processing, from designer gowns to a government-issued khaki uniform, from Congresswoman to inmate number 47839-2037. The first months were brutal, not because of violence — Danbury is relatively safe as federal prisons go — but because of the absolute loss of everything she had built. Her entire identity had been AOC, the Congresswoman, the progressive icon, the social media phenomenon, the future of the Democratic Party. Now she was just another inmate, and nobody cared about her TikTok followers behind bars. The verdict in November 2025 had been devastating. Guilty on 14 of 17 counts. The 3 counts she beat were technical, as the jury couldn't agree on whether specific payments constituted fraud versus legitimate consulting. But the big ones — the Chinese money, the boyfriend slush fund, the false financial disclosures — were guilty, guilty, guilty. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later was even worse. Her lawyers had begged for leniency, arguing she was young, a first-time offender with no prior criminal record, and asked for probation or at most 3 years. The prosecution presented victim impact statements, not from Chinese companies obviously, but from the actual small-dollar donors who had believed in her, who had given $20 or $50 of their hard-earned money, thinking they were supporting a grassroots democratic socialist. Maria Rodriguez, a home health aide from the Bronx, testified, "I gave her $200 over 2 years. That was my grocery money some weeks. I believed she was fighting for people like me, but she was living in a $4 million mansion while I'm in a rent-controlled apartment wondering if I can afford both food and medicine. She lied to me. She stole from me." David Chen, a restaurant worker from Queens, said, "I canvassed for her, knocked on doors, talked to my neighbors about how she was going to change things. I defended her when people called her radical, And the whole time she was taking money from Chinese companies and paying her boyfriend millions for fake work. I feel like an idiot. 17 donors testified, working-class people, immigrants, students, all people who had believed AOC represented them, all feeling betrayed and used. The judge, Obama appointee Catherine Forrest, had been visibly moved by the testimony. When it came time to sentence, her voice was hard. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, you built your entire political career on authenticity, on being a regular person from the Bronx who understood struggle, who fought for working people because you were one of them. That was your brand. That was why people trusted you with their money and their votes. But it was all a lie, she declared. You weren't struggling, you were living in luxury. You weren't funded by working people. You were funded by Chinese state-owned enterprises. You weren't fighting for the people. You were enriching yourself and your boyfriend. And when confronted with evidence, you showed no remorse. You claimed to be a victim of political persecution. You blamed Republicans. You blamed the system. You blamed everyone except yourself. You have shown no insight into the harm you caused, the people who gave you money they couldn't afford, the progressive movement you discredited, the trust you betrayed. I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. You will serve 85% of that sentence as federal law requires for these crimes. That means 10 years and 2 months minimum before you are eligible for supervised release, and you will also pay $3.2 million in restitution to your defrauded donors. AOC had broken down crying. 12 years meant she would be nearly 40 when she got out, and her 20s and 30s, the prime years of her life, would be spent in federal prison. Her mother collapsed in the courtroom and had to be helped out by family members, while Riley Roberts, sitting in the back, had looked pale and scared, facing his own trial in 3 months. Within hours of the verdict, the political world turned on her completely. Speaker Hakeem Jeffries released a statement before she had even left the courthouse. The jury has spoken. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez betrayed the trust of her constituents and the American people. She should resign immediately. If she doesn't, the House will expel her. She resigned that night, releasing a statement, still claiming persecution, but saying she didn't want to be a distraction. The squad imploded. Rashida Tlaib issued a statement, saying she was shocked and disappointed by the verdict and the evidence presented at trial. Translation: I can't defend this. Ayanna Pressley said, I have always believed in accountability, regardless of party. The jury found her guilty on serious charges, and we must respect the judicial process. Even Bernie Sanders, who had been her political mentor, released a carefully worded statement. Campaign finance violations and fraud are serious matters. If the allegations are proven true, and a jury has now found them to be, then appropriate consequences must follow. The progressive movement is about fighting corruption, not engaging in it. Progressives were furious at her, not at the prosecution, but at her, because she had discredited everything they had been trying to build. Every time they talked about getting money out of politics, opponents would say, like AOC did with Chinese money? Every time they talked about representing working people, opponents would bring up her $4 million mansion. She had become a weapon used against progressives, and they hated her for it. Justice Democrats, the organization that had recruited her to run in 2018, held an emergency board meeting and voted to dissolve the entire organization, stating, the damage to our mission and credibility is irreparable. Sunrise lost 90% of its funding within 3 months because nobody wanted to donate to an organization that had been a conduit for Chinese money. And by mid-2026, they had laid off all staff and ceased operations. Brand New Congress, Courage to Change, Green New Deal Network, all the organizations in her ecosystem either dissolved or were so tainted they became irrelevant. She hadn't just destroyed her own career. She had destroyed the entire infrastructure of progressive politics that had been built around her. Riley Roberts went to trial in March 2026. His defense was simple. He had provided real consulting work, but the PACs just hadn't kept good records. The prosecution destroyed that defense in 3 days, calling executive directors from all 4 PACs that had paid him under oath. All of them admitted they couldn't identify any work product Riley had delivered. Varshini Prakash from Sunrise Movement, granted immunity for her testimony, was devastating. "We paid Riley because AOC told us to. She said he was valuable to her operation, and we wanted to keep her happy. We didn't ask what he was doing because we knew the answer was nothing. But she was our star advocate, and we needed her. So we paid." Translation: this was a bribe, paying her boyfriend to keep her happy and cooperative. Riley's lawyers tried to argue he had done general strategic consulting that wasn't easily documentable, but when the prosecutor asked him to name a single strategic recommendation he had made, Riley couldn't. When asked to describe a single meeting where he had provided advice, he gave vague answers about collaborative discussions but couldn't cite specifics. The prosecutor pulled up his bank records and said, "Mr. Roberts, your company received $9 million over 3 years. Your business expenses totaled $47,000. That is a 97% profit margin. You had no employees, no office, no equipment, no software subscriptions. What exactly were you spending money on to run this business?" Riley had no good answer because there was no business, just a bank account where money went in and then transferred to his personal account. The jury found him guilty on all counts in 4 hours. At sentencing, he tried to blame AOC, saying through tears, "I was young and in love. Alexandria told me this was normal, that political consulting was like this, that everyone did it. I trusted her. She set this whole thing up. I just went along with it." He threw her under the bus to try to get a lighter sentence, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. "You are 35 years old, Mr. Roberts. You have a degree from Boston University. You are not a naive child who was manipulated," the judge stated. "You knowingly participated in a fraud scheme that netted you nearly $2 million. You did no work, and you knew you were doing no work. That is theft." He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay back $1.9 million in restitution. When AOC heard about Riley's testimony blaming her and claiming she had manipulated him, she was furious and wrote him a letter from prison that her lawyer advised her not to send, but she sent anyway, and it got leaked to the media. "You fucking coward! You took the money just as eagerly as I did. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're going to pretend you were some innocent victim? We built this together, and when it collapsed, you sold me out to save yourself. I hope you rot." The letter made her look worse, showing she still had no remorse and was still angry at everyone except herself. Riley served 22 months at FCI Schuylkill in Pennsylvania, was released in early 2028, moved to Portland, Oregon, changed his name to Riley Martin, and now works as a marketing coordinator for a small tech company making $62,000 a year. He has never publicly spoken about AOC. His LinkedIn profile doesn't mention digital outreach strategies, and he has tried to disappear. AOC has never forgiven him for his testimony. Even now, she maintains that if Riley hadn't turned on her, she might have beaten some of the charges. The first year at Danbury was an adjustment. AOC was assigned to a 4-person unit where 2 of her unit mates were white-collar criminals, an accountant who had embezzled from her firm, and a healthcare executive who had committed Medicare fraud, and the third was a woman serving time for drug trafficking. At first, being AOC still meant something. Some inmates recognized her, asked for autographs, and wanted to hear political gossip. She held court in the common area, telling stories about Congress and maintaining some echo of her old celebrity. But that lasted about 6 weeks. Then the novelty wore off, and being a disgraced former congresswoman didn't make you special in federal prison. Everyone there had been somebody on the outside. The healthcare executive had made $500,000 a year, and the drug trafficker had run a multi-state operation. Everyone had a story, and more importantly, everyone was serving time for crimes. AOC was no different, just another criminal, just another inmate who had gotten caught. The Chinese money angle made her particularly unpopular with certain groups, specifically military veterans. Several women at Danbury who had served despised her for taking money from China and pushing policies that hurt American workers. One former Marine told her to her face, "You are a traitor. You should be in a supermax, not here." Progressive inmates who had believed in her were even worse. A woman serving time for environmental protest actions who had chained herself to pipeline equipment confronted AOC in the cafeteria 3 months in, saying, "I went to jail fighting for the climate, real jail, federal charges, and you were getting rich off Chinese solar companies while pretending to care. You made all of us look like frauds. I hope you rot here." The prison hierarchy is real, and AOC was at the bottom. Disgraced politician, fraud convict, traitor to her supposed values. Nobody respected her. She tried to maintain her political identity at first, talking about how she had been persecuted, how the system was rigged, and how Republicans had weaponized the justice system against her. Her unit mate, the accountant, finally told her to shut up. "Nobody here wants to hear it. We all broke the law. We all got caught. We all tried to justify it. Take responsibility or don't. But stop talking about persecution. You got caught stealing. Own it." AOC never really owned it. Even years later, she maintained she had been targeted, but she stopped talking about it openly because nobody wanted to hear it. New York's 14th District held a special election in March 2026 to fill her vacant seat, and the Democratic primary was vicious, with multiple candidates running explicitly against her legacy. "I am not AOC. I am actually from this district. I will actually fight for working people instead of Chinese companies," was the common theme. The winner was Richie Torres, who had previously represented a neighboring district. He ran on a platform of restoring integrity and actually delivering for the Bronx and Queens. In his victory speech, Torres was blunt. "The previous representative betrayed your trust, took money from foreign companies, and lied about who she was. I promise you, I will never take a dime from any foreign source. I will never use this office to enrich myself, and I will actually live like someone who represents working people because I am one." He won the general election with 73% of the vote, while the Republican got 18%, and the Democratic Socialist candidate running on AOC's old platform got 9%. Even her own district had rejected everything she represented. Torres's first act in Congress was introducing the Campaign Finance Transparency Act, requiring all PACs to disclose original sources of donations, not just immediate sources, making it harder to launder foreign money through shell organizations. It passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, and everyone called it the AOC Act, even though that wasn't the official name. She had become a cautionary tale, a punchline, a warning about what happens when you fraud your way to the top. AOC's social media empire collapsed faster than anyone expected. Her accounts weren't deleted. She still technically controlled them, but they became graveyards. Her last Instagram post before prison in December 2025 was a statement claiming she had been convicted for fighting too hard for the people, and the comments were brutal. "You got convicted for fraud? You stole from working people? Enjoy prison fraud? You were my hero, now you make me sick." Her follower count started dropping, not slowly but precipitously. Within 6 months, she had lost 40 million followers across all platforms because people didn't want to be associated with her or have her in their follow lists. Some accounts became parody fodder. Conservative accounts would post, "This you," comparisons. On the left was her old tweet from 2019. "We need to get money out of politics. No corporate PAC money, no dark money, just people power." And next to it, a news article about her conviction with the reply, "This aged like milk. You took 8.3 million from China." Another tweet from 2022. "I'll never forget where I came from. I'm still the same bartender from the Bronx, fighting for working people," with the reply, "You lived in a $4 million mansion while tweeting this. Fraud." Every old tweet became evidence of her hypocrisy, and her entire social media history became a weapon against her. By 2027, mentions of her name on social media were 92% negative, according to analytics. She had become universally hated. Conservatives hated her for the Chinese money. Progressives hated her for discrediting their movement. And regular people hated her for the fraud. In prison, she had no access to social media, which was probably for the best. She couldn't see how thoroughly she had been erased from the cultural conversation, how quickly she had gone from icon to punchline to forgotten. AOC's mother, Blanca Ocasio-Cortez, never recovered from the shame. A deeply religious woman and devout Catholic, watching her daughter be convicted of fraud and sentenced to 12 years destroyed her. She gave one interview to Univision in 2026, speaking in Spanish and crying through most of it. "I don't know what happened to my daughter. The Alexandria the far-raised believed in honesty, in hard work, in faith. She went to Congress and something changed the fame, the money, the attention. She became someone I didn't recognize, and now she's in prison, and I pray every day for her soul." Asked if she had visited Alexandria in prison, Blanca said, "Once, I went once." She was angry, bitter, blaming everyone else. She wouldn't accept responsibility, wouldn't admit she had done wrong. I told her she needed to confess her sins to God to seek forgiveness, and she told me I didn't understand politics, that I was being naive. I left, and I haven't been back. I can't watch her destroy herself with pride. Blanca died in 2028 of a heart attack at 63. AOC was granted a 4-hour supervised release to attend the funeral in shackles with 2 federal marshals. At the funeral, family members barely spoke to her. Her brother Gabriel, who had always been close to her, told her, "You killed Mom. The shame of what you did, the stress of the trial, it destroyed her health. This is your fault." AOC tried to hug him, but he pushed her away. After the funeral, she was transported back to Danbury. She had been out of prison for 4 hours, saw her mother buried, been rejected by her family, and lost everything. The $3.2 million restitution order devastated her financially. The government seized her $4 million townhouse immediately and auctioned it off for $4.2 million. But after paying the mortgage she had secretly taken out, she had lied about the cash purchase. The government got $3.7 million, which covered the restitution. But then there were the legal fees. Her criminal defense had cost $8 million, and her lawyers had worked on contingency, initially believing they could win. But after the conviction, they demanded payment. She had nothing, so they sued her estate. Riley owed her money as they had commingled finances, and she had lent him money for his legal fees, but he declared bankruptcy, so she got nothing back. Her $401K from her congressional service, about $180,000, was garnished for legal fees. The Tesla was seized and sold. Her designer clothes were seized and auctioned. A gallery department jacket she had worn to the Met Gala sold for $8,000 to a memorabilia collector, and the rich dress, which she had borrowed but never returned, sold for $32,000, with the money going to her creditors. By 2027, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a negative net worth. She owed more than she had, and she was sitting in federal prison making 12 cents an hour working in the prison laundry facility. By 2028, AOC's name had become a political weapon. Republicans used her in every campaign ad. Democrats gave us AOC, a fraud funded by China, and the association was poisonous. Democrats running in competitive districts actively attacked her, saying, "I'm not AOC, I don't take foreign money, I actually care about American workers." Even in deep blue districts, progressive candidates distanced themselves. The Democratic Socialist label became toxic, and "I'm a progressive, not a Democratic Socialist like AOC," became a common refrain. The Green New Deal was dead, not because Republicans killed it, but because AOC had poisoned it. Every time someone mentioned transitioning to renewable energy, opponents said, "You mean so China can get richer like they did with AOC?" No thanks. Climate policy became harder to pass because she had been the face of it, and now everyone knew she had been funded by Chinese solar companies. The association was impossible to shake, and progressive organizations struggled to fundraise. "We're not like Justice Democrats" or Sunrise Movement became a necessary disclaimer because donors were scared their money might go to another fraud. The Squad brand was destroyed. Rashida Tlaib lost her primary in 2026 to a moderate. Ayanna Pressley barely held on, and Cori Bush lost in 2028. The movement AOC had represented was dead. Historians would later write that she had set progressive politics back a decade, not through her policies, but through her fraud. She had made people distrust the entire movement. In December 2035, after serving 10 years and 2 months, AOC became eligible for supervised release and faced a federal parole board hearing. She had aged noticeably, looking 50, though she was not yet 40. Prison had been hard with the stress, the isolation, and the loss of everything. The parole board asked standard questions. Had she taken responsibility? Did she understand the harm she caused? What were her plans, if released? AOC's answers were not good. "I take responsibility for not being more careful about vetting funding sources. I should have done more due diligence on where PAC money originated. Not exactly full ownership of fraud, but I also think I was targeted because I was effective, because I challenged powerful interests." The prosecution was politically motivated, even if some of the charges had technical merit. The parole board member, a former federal prosecutor, stopped her. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez, a jury convicted you on 14 counts. Are you saying they were wrong?" "I am saying the system is designed to punish people who challenge it," she replied. "So you do not believe you committed crimes?" he asked. After a long pause, she said, "I believe I made mistakes in judgment. That is not the same as accepting responsibility for fraud." Another pause. Then she added, "I trusted people who told me certain funding streams were legitimate. I trusted my boyfriend when he said he was doing work. I was naive." "You were naive at 29 years old as a sitting member of Congress?" the member retorted. "You expect us to believe you didn't know you were taking Chinese money and paying your boyfriend for fake work?" "The system is complicated," AOC said. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez, after 10 years in prison, you still do not accept responsibility for your crimes. Is that correct?" he asked. She didn't answer. The parole board denied her release, citing lack of remorse, failure to accept responsibility, and risk of reoffending. Request for supervised release is denied. Review again in 2 years. AOC broke down crying, But even in her crying, there was anger. Anger at the board, at the system, at Republicans, at everyone except herself. She had spent 10 years in prison and learned nothing. In December 2037, AOC came up for parole again. She was 39 years old now and had spent 12 years in federal prison, 2 years beyond her minimum because of the denied parole. This time she had prepared differently. Her lawyer had coached her extensively. You need to show genuine remorse, real understanding of what you did wrong, or they will deny you again. The parole board asked the same questions, but this time AOC's answers were different. I committed fraud. I took money from Chinese companies that was laundered through PACs. I paid my boyfriend for fake work. I lied about my financial situation to maintain an image. These were crimes. I broke the law. I betrayed people who trusted me. She paused, then continued, I was young and arrogant. I thought the rules didn't apply to me. I thought my political message justified any means. I was wrong. The people who gave me $20 they couldn't afford, they deserved honesty. And I didn't give them that. I stole from them. The parole board member pressed, What specifically do you regret? I regret taking money without checking its source. I regret setting up the scheme with Riley, where we paid him for nothing. I regret lying about living like a struggling bartender while I was in a mansion. I regret all of it. If released, what would you do? The board asked. Stay quiet? Stay out of politics? Get a regular job? Pay my remaining debts? Try to rebuild some relationship with my family? Not seek attention? Just live a quiet life. You spent years as one of the most famous politicians in America. You expect us to believe you will just disappear? I do not have a choice, she replied. Nobody would listen to me anyway. I destroyed my reputation. I understand that. I am not looking to be famous again. I just want to be free. The board deliberated and came back 2 hours later. Supervised release is granted. Conditions: 5 years supervised release. Monthly reporting to probation officer. No political activity or fundraising. No social media accounts in your own name. Gainful employment required within 90 days. Any violation returns you to custody. AOC was released on January 15, 2038. She was 39 years old and had served 12 years and 1 month in federal prison. She walked out of FCI Danbury wearing donated clothes, as she had nothing of her own. Her brother Gabriel was there to pick her up, and they barely spoke during the drive to the Bronx. He had rented her a studio apartment in a building on 149th Street, 500 square feet, 3rd floor walk-up, $900 a month. This was the woman who had owned a $4 million townhouse a decade earlier. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, formerly the most famous millennial politician in America, disappeared into obscurity. She got a job through a re-entry program working at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people find housing, which was ironic given that housing inequality had been one of her signature issues when she was in Congress. She made $38,000 a year, lived in that studio apartment, took the subway to work, bought groceries at Associated, and lived like an actual working-class person for the first time since 2018. A journalist from New York Magazine found her in 2040 and did a profile titled, Whatever Happened to AOC. The interview was sad. AOC, now 42, looked worn down and defeated as she spoke quietly about prison, about losing everything, about realizing too late what she had thrown away. I was 28 when I got elected. I thought I was going to change the world. I thought being famous and having followers meant I was making a difference, she said, but I was just performing, and somewhere along the way the performance became more important than the principles. I started believing my own hype, started thinking the rules were for other people. Asked if she would ever return to politics, she laughed bitterly. Nobody would have me, and honestly, I don't deserve it. I had a chance to actually help people, and I used it to enrich myself. That's on me. I live with that every day. Do you follow politics? The interviewer asked. Sometimes it's painful. I see young progressives trying to do what I claimed I wanted to do, and I know I made it harder for them because now every time they propose something, opponents bring up my name. Oh, like AOC, who was funded by China? I poisoned the well for the next generation. That is my real legacy. The interview got some attention online, with the consensus reaction being that she had learned nothing and was still playing the victim, even if her remorse was performed. Maybe that was fair. Or maybe after 12 years in prison, AOC had actually learned something, but nobody believed her anymore. Either way, it didn't matter. She had been erased from political relevance. In 2042, 15 years after her conviction, something darkly ironic happened. The nonprofit where AOC worked downsized due to budget cuts, and she was laid off. At 44 years old, a former member of Congress, she needed a job. So she ended up bartending again, not at a trendy Manhattan bar, like before her political career, but at a dive bar in the Bronx called Patty's, on 149th Street, 3 blocks from her apartment. She worked Friday and Saturday nights, making $15 an hour plus tips, averaging maybe $200 a night. Sometimes customers recognized her. "Wait, are you?" "No," she would say. But some knew, and they weren't kind. "Yo, aren't you that congresswoman who went to jail? I'm just trying to do my job." "Damn, you really fell off. Used to be famous. Now you're pouring beers in the Bronx." She had learned to tune it out, to just pour the drinks, take the tips, and go home. One night in 2043, a CUNY political science class came into the bar. The professor recognized her and approached carefully, asking, "I teach a class about corruption and accountability. We study your case. Would you ever be willing to speak to my students?" AOC thought about it. What would she even say? The truth? What she did? Why she did it? What she would do differently? She agreed. She spoke to the class the following month. 30 students, mostly young, mostly POC, mostly progressive. She was honest. "I committed fraud. I got caught. I went to prison. I deserved it." The lesson is not about how the system is rigged. The lesson is, don't break the law. Don't think you are special. Don't think your message justifies any means. Because when you get caught, nobody will care about your message. They will only care that you are a fraud. One student asked, "Do you regret going into politics?" "I regret how I did politics," she replied. "I don't regret wanting to make a difference. I regret thinking making a difference meant making myself famous." Another student asked, "Would you do it again? Politics?" "No, not ever. I had my chance. I destroyed it. That door is closed." The professor asked, "What do you tell young progressives who want to follow in your footsteps?" "Don't follow in my footsteps," she answered. "Follow in the footsteps of people who actually lived their values, who didn't take foreign money, who didn't lie about who they were, who didn't use their position to get rich. There are people like that. Learn from them, not from me. I am a cautionary tale. That is all I will ever be." The students were quiet. Some had come expecting fire, the old AOC energy, but they got a broken middle-aged woman who bartended and lived in a studio apartment. It was depressing. In 2044, JD Vance was running for president. The Republican nomination was his, after serving as VP for 8 years under Trump and building a reputation as serious, competent, and not crazy. During a campaign rally in Ohio, someone asked him about AOC. You took down Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That was 6 years into your first term as VP. Looking back, what do you think about that case? Vance smiled and said, I think justice was served. She committed serious crimes. Foreign money laundering, fraud, false statements. The evidence was overwhelming. She got convicted, and she served her time. That is how it is supposed to work. She is bartending now in the Bronx. I heard that. He added, good for her. Honest work. She should have stuck with that, instead of going into politics to enrich herself. The crowd laughed. But Vance continued, but here is the real legacy of that case. It showed that nobody is above the law. Not even the most famous millennial congresswoman with millions of social media followers. If you break the law, you face consequences. Doesn't matter how popular you are, doesn't matter how many TikTok views you have, evidence matters. Law matters. We cleaned up campaign finance because of that case. The AOC Act requires full transparency on PAC funding sources and makes it much harder to launder foreign money. That is good for democracy. And we showed that the Democratic Socialist brand was a fraud. They claim to represent working people, but they are just grifters trying to get rich off the movement. AOC proved that she lived in a mansion while pretending to struggle, took Chinese money while claiming to fight for American workers. She was a fake, and now everyone knows it. So yeah, I am glad we prosecuted that case. I am glad she went to prison, and I am glad she is bartending now instead of in Congress. That is where she belongs. The crowd erupted in applause. AOC, watching a clip of this on her phone in her apartment, felt the humiliation wash over her again. The man who destroyed her was about to be president, and he was using her destruction as a campaign talking point. She was literally a punchline in his stump speech. That was her legacy, not the Green New Deal, not fighting for working people, but being the corrupt millennial congresswoman who went to prison for fraud. That is all anyone would ever remember. In 2045, AOC turned 47. She was still bartending, still on supervised release, which had been extended twice for minor technical violations, and still living in that studio apartment. HBO announced a documentary titled AOC, The Rise and Fall of America's Most Famous Socialist. She wasn't consulted and didn't participate, but she watched it when it aired because she couldn't help herself. It was brutal. 2 hours documenting her meteoric rise and spectacular fall, with interviews with former colleagues, with prosecutors, with the donors she had defrauded, and with Riley Roberts, who had agreed to participate. Riley looked good, had rebuilt his life, was married now, and working a normal job. He spoke about the fraud with what seemed like genuine remorse. We were young and stupid and got caught up in the fame. Alexandria was the star, and I was along for the ride. We thought we were special, that normal rules didn't apply. We were wrong. I went to prison. I deserved it. I am trying to do better now. The documentary ended with footage of AOC at Patty's bar. Someone had secretly filmed her pouring beers, looking tired and old. The final line narrated over that footage was, "From congresswoman to convict to bartender, this is what happens when ambition and fraud collide." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wanted to change the world. Instead, she became a warning about what happens when you betray the people who believed in you. The documentary was nominated for an Emmy. AOC became a meme again, but not an inspiring one, a cautionary one. Don't be like. AOC became shorthand for "Don't let fame corrupt you." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is 52 years old now. She stopped bartending 3 years ago because her back couldn't handle it anymore. Now, she works as an administrative assistant at the same nonprofit, making $42,000 a year. She lives alone, never married, never had kids, Prison and supervised release took those years and has limited contact with family. Gabriel speaks to her occasionally, but they are not close. She is allowed on social media now that supervised release ended in 2043, but she doesn't use it. She has a private Instagram account with 17 followers, all personal friends, and never posts. Sometimes she sees articles about the Squad, or the Green New Deal, or progressive politics, sees young representatives trying to do what she claimed she wanted to do, and she feels a deep sense of loss, not for her career, but for what she could have been if she had been honest. In 2050, a college student doing a thesis on political corruption tracked her down and asked for an interview. AOC agreed, and they met at a coffee shop on 149th Street. The student asked, "If you could go back and do it all again, what would you change?" AOC thought for a long time before replying, "Everything. I would change everything. Or more honestly, I wouldn't run at all. I wasn't ready. I was 28 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I was good at performing, and politics rewarded performing. So I performed and I got famous, and fame became more important than principle." "Do you think the system was rigged against you?" the student asked. "No. I broke the law. The system held me accountable. That is how it should work," she said. "Do you think you got a fair trial?" "Absolutely. The evidence was overwhelming. I am lucky I only got 12 years. I deserved more." "What is your biggest regret?" After a long pause, AOC's eyes got wet. "The people who believed in me," she whispered. "The woman who gave me money she needed for groceries. The guy who canvassed for me. The young people who thought I represented something real. I lied to them. I stole from them, not just their money, but their hope, their belief that politics could be different. I destroyed that. That is what I regret most. Would you ever run for office again?" She laughed, not a happy laugh, but a sad one, and said, "Nobody would vote for me, and I wouldn't deserve their votes. That part of my life is over. I am just trying to live quietly and pay my debts. That is it." The student left and wrote a thesis that was sympathetic to AOC's fall from grace. But the professor gave it a B-, noting it was too sympathetic to a convicted fraud. She got what she deserved. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will turn 60 in 2051. She will have been out of prison for 15 years by then, and will have lived longer after Congress than she lived before it. She will still be in the Bronx, still working an ordinary job, still living like the working-class person she always claimed to be, but never was until she lost everything. When she dies, hopefully many years from now, the obituaries will be brutal. Former Congresswoman who went to prison for fraud, AOC, the millennial politician who became a cautionary tale, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who destroyed progressive politics, dead at XX. Nobody will remember her policies, nobody will remember her speeches, nobody will remember the hope she once represented to millions of young progressives. They will remember the fraud, the Chinese money, the boyfriend scheme, the mansion while claiming to be working class, and the 12 years in prison. That is her legacy, not the democratic socialism, but the fraud. And somewhere, JD Vance, who by then will likely have served 2 terms as president, will be asked about her death. He will say something measured, something about how she paid her debt to society, how it is sad she threw away so much potential, how she could have been something great but chose corruption instead. And privately, he will think justice was served. She broke the law. She faced consequences. That is how it should be. And he will be right. Because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was not a revolutionary who got martyred by a corrupt system. She was a fraud who got caught, and she spent the rest of her life paying for it. That is not persecution. That is justice. and justice, in the end, is satisfied.